I don't think there was very high hopes for me when I was younger. So I didn't know my dad. I didn't meet my dad until I was 27. Had the model girlfriend, sports car, dream body, and I was just very unfulfilled. I didn't feel like I had any goals. I didn't feel like I had any purpose. And I ended up sitting on the edge of a bed contemplating suicide the year after I made the most money I'd ever made. I was sitting on my recliner on the weekend, and I opened up the Facebook app. So I was going through my messages for some reason, and I saw a message that said, "Hey Kev, I am blank, I'm your father's girlfriend." And this message, when I got to it, was at least a year old. It might have been even 2 years old. So I literally threw my phone on the floor, I fell on the floor and started bawling my eyes out. Because in my mind, this monster that I've created, I'm never gonna have to see. And I texted one of my friends. I said, "Hey, my dad pretty much just contacted me. And this person had a very good understanding of my past." And they said, "What are you going to do?" And at the end of the day, I turned out just fine. And I think the man I am today is a big reason of that is because of not having a dad.
A lot of people find rock bottom, and to you, that rock bottom had a basement. You hit depression, you had suicidal thoughts. Walk me through that. Tell me about that.
The reason it all came together the way it did was
the way that I really, really love to start this podcast, two questions that I always ask is, and I think I'm going to ask this question because I feel like this question is very important to ask when it comes to reading a little bit about your background, is how are you currently doing right now? How are you currently feeling right now? You know, those typical questions where people ask you, they're like, how are you doing? It's like, how are you actually currently doing?
Yeah, I appreciate the question. And I'm excited to be here. I appreciate your time. I appreciate you having me. I'm very excited. I am currently very overwhelmed. We have had a lot of growth in a very short period of time, and this is probably the most busy week I've ever had as a human. So I had 40 calls booked for this week, and that's not including 7 podcast episodes. That's not including 7 workouts. That's not including a lot of other stuff behind the scenes, responding to clients and stuff like that. So this has been the busiest, most overwhelming week probably of my life. I'm very fulfilled in that, but it is definitely a challenge that I am excited. We're recording this on Saturday, and this is my last recording of the week. I'm actually excited about that. I have one business meeting after this, but overwhelmed, but very fulfilled and aligned is what I would say.
I love how you answered that because it does take a lot to do this stuff. And I know you're a host yourself, and I know that you have your own podcast. The reason why I asked that question first is because now I want you to explain my second follow-up question is, what do we have to know about you? What do we have to understand about you to know why you are the person you are today, to understand the mission that you're on today, why you have so many calls and so many meetings? What led you to this moment? Give me a little bit about your backstory, a little bit about what made you you today.
Yeah, I don't think there was very high hopes for me when I was younger. I was raised as a child by my mom and my grandmother. So I didn't know my dad. I didn't meet my dad until I was 27. So obviously that plays a role in a young man's life. And I knew pretty early on that I didn't want to go to college. So when I was in high school, in my mind, I knew, I knew that I wasn't going to be going to college. So when I graduated high school, I just did a bunch of odd jobs because that's all I could do. I worked at a gas station. I worked at a hospital cleaning floors and bathrooms, personal trainer, truck driver, forklift operator, construction, tiling, whatever I could do, usually physical labor. I ended up achieving a certain level of success in my mid-20s, and I was making 6 figures. Had the model girlfriend, sports car, dream body. I competed and won a bodybuilding show, so I was in really good shape. And I was just very unfulfilled. I didn't feel like I had any goals. I didn't feel like I had any purpose. And I ended up sitting on the edge of a bed contemplating suicide the year after I made the most money I'd ever made. And at that point, I had started a podcast called the Hyperconscious Podcast, where I wanted to have deep talks just like we're having today, And I just wanted to get to know people, and I wanted to know what they were excited for and what they were afraid of and what they wanted their lives to look like. And I just fell in love with podcasting. I loved it, but it never seemed realistic for me to be where I am today. And that created a lot of mental anguish and depression and anxiety. And I had several bouts of suicidal ideations. And then I ended up leaving the full-time corporate job thing in 2018. And I've been doing this ever since. So I would say this is the thing that everyone should know. Many days, I don't know how I got to where I am. Many days, I feel like I can't handle where I am. And a lot of that's just inner dialogue that I've proven wrong. But yeah, I have days where I don't feel like I should be here. I do feel like I'm playing with house money very often. And now I feel like I have the responsibility to make sure I keep doing what I did to get here. We have very, very big goals and very, very big aspirations to have a very successful, the most successful self-improvement company on the planet. That is why I have as many calls as I do, because it's actually working, which is great. But it's very humbling twofold. One, being able to do as many things as we do and being able to be in front of as many people as we are, that's super humbling. But it's also humbling looking at the mountain of the goals that we have and trying to figure out how do we get to the top of those. So it's really two things. One, everything we've been doing is actually working. So the demand on my time is actually increased, which is amazing. Part two, this is the necessary requirement of what it will take in order for us to accomplish the goals that we have decided we want to accomplish, and we want to have a level of impact. And this is what it takes to have that level of impact.
Kevin, you almost got me very emotional right now, because the way I think about it is a lot of, I just mentioned this earlier, was that when people say they understand what you're going through, nobody's really going to understand what you're going through. A lot of the times everybody just has their own versions of it, but they don't really understand. And, you know, it's very odd to say, I understand what you're going through. You mentioned a lot of key things right now and a lot of key things that I want to talk about. But one of the things that really got me to wanting to know a little bit about your background was that you didn't meet your parents till you were 27. Tell me a little bit about that. Tell me about your childhood. Tell me about how you even met your parents at 27.
So I did have my mom in my life. So I was raised by my mom and my grandmother. So I want to make sure we have that there. But growing up, I remember this. This is the first really key understanding for me that I was quote unquote different than many other people. It was probably 4th grade, 5th grade. On the first day of school, for some reason, when you are in your classroom, you go around the class and you say, my name is Kevin, and my mom works in the medical field, and my dad is something. And I remember that day saying, my mom is in the medical field, and my dad is in construction. And I just made that up. I didn't know who my dad was. I didn't know what my dad looked like. I don't think I even knew my dad's name. And I just made it up because I didn't want kids to know that I didn't know who my dad was. So from what I have gathered, when I was born, my dad was not necessarily a law-abiding citizen. And there was a lot of things going on with drugs and alcohol and motorcycle gangs and stuff like that. So he was very much a not there parent, to the point where eventually my mom said, look, if you're not going to be around, don't come around. And that was kind of it. In my childhood, I don't think I ever really sat with what that meant. I created an ego around the fact that I didn't have a dad. And I said, I don't care. I don't need him. It's his loss. I hate him. If he died tomorrow, I wouldn't care. I'm never going to see this man. And that was the way I was. I didn't care when people said, I'm so sorry that your dad's not around. I said, I don't care. It's not that big of a deal. That's how I lived most of my life. That really shifted for me when I was 27. Again, there wasn't a lot between the early days and getting to my mid to late 20s. I was just so stubborn, and there was this ego around it. But I was sitting on my recliner on the weekend, and I lived in New Hampshire at the time. And I opened up the Facebook app, and within the app, there is a folder for messages that come from people who aren't on your friends list. And I didn't know that at the time. I didn't understand how that worked. So I was going through my messages for some reason, and I saw a message that said, hey, Kev, I am blank. I'm your father's girlfriend. And I said, absolutely not. we are not going to do this today. It's the weekend. No. So I sat with it for a second, and then I opened my phone back up and I said, all right, let's take a look at this. And the message said, hey, Kevin, I'm blank. I'm your father's girlfriend. Your father has seen you on Facebook and you seem to be doing really well. He's proud of you. If you would like the opportunity to meet him, he would like that very much. Just let me know and I can set it up. And this message, when I got to it, was at least a year old. It might have been even 2 years old. I didn't see it because I didn't know it was in that folder. So I literally threw my phone on the floor. I fell on the floor and started bawling my eyes out because in my mind, this monster that I've created, I'm never going to have to see. I can say whatever I want. I can wish that he's not here. I can say if he dies, it wouldn't matter to me because I'm never going to see him. So it doesn't matter. And I texted one of my friends. I said, hey, my dad pretty much just contacted me. And this person had a very good understanding of my past. And they said, what are you going to do? And I said, I think I have to go see him. I don't want to, but I think I have to. And this person said, do you want me to come with you? And I said, no, I have to do this on my own. So I messaged them back and said, yeah, let's do it. Let's meet. We'll meet halfway between where we live and we'll do this. And that day, I remember driving down there just super nervous. I get there early as I do. I'm usually early when I go places. And I walk in, I sit down, and I had this moment, Isaac, where I literally thought to myself, I don't even know what my dad looks like. So I don't know how I'm going to even know when he gets here. And I'm sitting there in the booth facing the window, and this guy walks by. And I was like, all right, that's my dad. I don't know how I know. It's just an energetic thing. I'm pretty sure that's my dad. So he came in, he found me, he sat down, and it was about as awkward of a conversation as you can imagine. There was tears on his end. I was closed off. You're not going to get any emotion out of me. And I realized a lot of things that day. But the thing that really came out the most for me was I have given so much power and so much control to someone who doesn't deserve it. At that point, I had worked really hard on myself, and he hadn't worked on himself at all. And it was very clear to me that I had a higher level of awareness, a higher level of self-improvement, and it was very much like I'm actually the dad in this relationship. I have given this man so much control over my emotions and my anger, when in reality, he shouldn't have it, and he really couldn't handle that power even if he did. So I decided that day to forgive him because I realized he's just a man who has made mistakes, and it's not personal. And honestly, I turned out okay. I don't think I would have the drive I have if he was around. So I forgave him that day, and I left understanding myself and him and my situation at a much deeper level. I spent a couple times with him after that. I went to his house, and I think we got lunch. And then I decided that I didn't really want to pursue that. It was really good for me to meet him. It was really good for me to understand that. It was really good for me to see him. But after that, I realized I don't really want to pick up where we are. I don't want to pretend like you're my dad and we're going to be really tight. I'm very busy. There's a lot going on in my life, and I just don't know if I'm willing to prioritize that. And I kind of just let it die. But I have the forgiveness. I have the lessons. It's given me insane perspective. And it taught me what I believe is the lesson that I needed to learn. So it's very interesting how, as a child, it affected me. For the rest of my life, I had anger things, probably anger issues. I was pretty angry at times, but I never knew it was because of that. And then it came to a head at 27 when I met him. And now I do feel like that chapter is kind of closed in a good way. I'm not running from it. I'm not hiding from it. I wouldn't be able to talk about it as freely as I am now if I was. So I'm really glad I went through all that and I ended up meeting him because it taught me a lot of lessons. And I realized, okay, I've grown a lot and not everybody else has. And I don't want to villainize this person. I don't want to give him power over me anymore. I'll forgive him. I'm going to keep doing my thing. And at the end of the day, I turned out just fine. And I think the man I am today is a big reason of that is because of not having a dad. And the last thing I'll say, I think it's a Tony Robbins quote. I think Tony Robbins says something along the lines of, if you're going to villainize for someone for all the wrong they did to you, you have to say thank you for all the right or all the good. the work ethic, the grit, the resilience, the level of suffering, the ability to suffer, a lot of that comes from not having a dad. So if I'm going to talk badly about him, the least I can do is also say some of the positives I've had as well.
You mentioned a monster you created before you met him. And I think that's something so strong to put into perspective. What was your mom's perspective when, I guess there's multiple questions here. There's multiple questions that I want to ask you is, why did you decide to describe him as a monster you created? And I feel like I know exactly why, just based off what you were saying. What was your mom's perspective on this? What was she trying to, how was she trying to comfort you? What was a reason your dad wasn't there in your life?
Yeah, the monster, it was easier to create a monster than it was to look at the truth. I think that was probably it. It was easier to create a monster than to be vulnerable and say, I'm really hurt. I'm really sad. I don't feel like maybe I'm good enough, and that's why he left. Maybe he left because of me. And honestly, I never thought I was going to see him. And that was a real big piece of it is there were times in my life where I would hear through the woodwork that my dad wasn't even alive. So it was like, okay. So in my mind, I had lost him so many times already that it didn't really matter. And I think I was just trying to come to terms with I was just never going to see him, and I might as well paint him in a negative light. My mom was always very, very supportive. She said she never stopped me from seeing him. She said, if you ever want to see him, let me know. I won't feel any type of way if you do want to see him. So she was very supportive in that, but she explained to me that he wasn't responsible and he wasn't capable of being a father in the beginning. And I think I just said, okay, I trust you. I'm going to take your side on this. And honestly, it's going to be fine. When one of my favorite questions as an interviewer, Isaac, especially asking counselors, therapists, psychologists, is how do you know if your normal is normal? And usually when I ask that question, they smile because they say there is no normal, or there's no such thing. And I say, right, so how do you define that? How do you unpack that? Even in that scenario, for me, not having a dad was normal. And once I came to terms with it, with the fact that it was normal, there wasn't really any support or consoling that needed to happen. I came to terms with it. That was my life. That was what was normal for me. And I liken that to when I was in middle school, I think. I went to the eye doctors for the first time in a minute. And the eye doctor said, Kevin's probably not very good at school, is he? And my mom was like, no, he's a B student. And they're like, all right. And they say, he's probably not very good at sports, right? And she said, I don't know why you're saying this, but no, he's an all-star baseball player. He's made the all-star team every single year. He's good at all sports. And they said, he's kind of like blind in his right eye. His right eye is like blind. And I remember after my mom said, how didn't you notice that? And I said, it's normal. That's what it's always been for me. I don't know. I don't know what other people see. I just see the ball and I swing, or I dive for the ball and I catch it. I'm just playing with different cards. I kind of liken it to that, where once you figure out your father isn't there, you come to terms with it. Now, did I have coping mechanisms of anger and stuff like that? Sure. I'm sure that's a big piece of it. But once I knew, that was kind of it. That was kind of it for me. Now, I'll also say, based on the humans I've spent time with and the deep conversations I've had, I have a very weird relationship with leaving people behind. I have a very weird relationship with going from being very close to someone to not speaking to them. And it doesn't bother me at the level I think it bothers other people. I still get sad. I still miss people, but I tend to be really good with moving on from people. And I wonder if that's not where it came from. Probably a coping mechanism, but long story, excuse me, super long. Once I knew, that was kind of it. There was really no consoling needed, no explanation needed. It was just, okay, this is my life. This is what's normal. And let's keep going. That was pretty much it.
Real quick, I want to cut into the conversation and say thank you to everybody listening right now, to listening to the conversations that we have with our guests, to following the podcast and being engaged with the podcast. I can't tell you how much that means the world to me and the team, for you to give an hour of your day to listen to these stories, to follow the podcast, to listen to these conversations. You can be doing anything else with that 1 hour,
but for some reason you chose to come here and listen to these conversations. So I'm very grateful. And thank you.
Walk me through that day. Walk me through the day that you sat with him and you had a conversation. What did that conversation look like? What happened when you sat with him?
Yeah, I think it was mostly... So again, he comes in, he sits down. I'm probably sweating through my clothes because I don't know what this is gonna entail. And that was, to this day, one of the bravest things I've ever had the opportunity to do because I was terrified. And I just remember a lot of it was apology. It was shame from his end. It was explanation. Because I think that's one of the things he said. I don't remember exactly. But I think one of the things he said was, I was messed up in my own stuff and I wasn't in a good place and there was jail involved and all sorts of different stuff. So I think what he was trying to do was explain why things ended up the way they ended up. And we probably sat there for, I don't know, maybe like an hour. And at the end of it, we exchanged numbers. And I remember when I left, I was on cloud 9 when I left. Even though it was weird, even though it was stressful, even though I'm not really any closer to him, the fact that I was willing to shine a light in that dark hole that I've never been willing to look in before was very, very powerful for me. But yeah, the day of it, it was just very uncomfortable. It was a very uncomfortable conversation. I remember him crying several times and me just sitting there looking at him. Very, very strange. I don't know what energy to hold. The last thing I want to do is be mean to the man. I don't want to tear him down. I don't want to be angry at him. I don't want to insult him. That's not what I want to do. But I also don't know how I'm feeling. So I was very closed off. I definitely was wrapped in an ego and there was zero emotion. You're not going to see any emotion out of me because I didn't know what I wanted to show. And I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't know if I was going to get mad. I didn't know if he was going to get mad. But most of it was apologetic. Most of it was shame. Most of it was regret, for sure. And I think that's also one of the reasons why I was able to forgive the way I was, because he showed me emotion. He showed me that he felt like he made a mistake. Now, here's the other thing, too. If I was down and out and I wasn't, quote unquote, successful, I don't know how I would have reacted. If I was really struggling, which I wasn't at the time I was doing well, I might have acted completely differently. But I was in a good place, so I felt like I had the abundance to give that to someone else.
There's two questions here. There's two different questions that I have. One is, do you feel like your life would have been still different in any way now if you had never met your father? And the second question would be, is your father still in your life now, or how does that look like now?
If I didn't meet my father, I think I'd be very different. I don't think I would be as empathetic. I really think one of the things I have now that I never had before was a very high level of empathy, to the point where I understand why some people don't want to grow to the level that I want to grow to, because I understand how challenging it is for me. So there's a piece of me that understands my dad had his own set of junk that he just didn't know how to fix. He didn't know how to work on his self-awareness. He didn't know how to look in the proverbial mirror. He didn't know that he should be learning. He didn't know about his ego. He didn't know about his limiting beliefs. He didn't know about his traumas, most likely. So that really helped me. It helped me, and it still helps me to this day, differentiate to a degree. I'm not about total forgiveness, but it helps me differentiate the difference between an action and a human. Just because you say something to me does not mean you're a terrible human. Now, are some people bad? Yes, there are some bad people out there. But some people say bad things because they're dealing with their own junk. So I think I would be missing that piece to the puzzle if I didn't see him that day. And I also don't think I would have the level of self-worth that I do today. That was the hardest thing I've ever done, but I'm very proud of myself for doing it. That was a big thing for me to go do that, to get the opportunity to face something that you're so afraid of and then do it anyway, even though you don't want to do it. There's nobody making you do it, and nobody would know if you didn't. So that brought a lot of confidence, that brought a lot of pride, and I think it brought a lot of self-worth. And at this point, I don't know, I haven't talked to my dad in probably at least a year, maybe a year and a half. So no, he is not in my life. There was kind of a line drawn in the sand for me. And he called me one day on a Wednesday or something, and I didn't answer. And he sent me a bunch of messages like, hey, call me back when you can, call me right back. And I decided that it wasn't enough of a priority for me to go through this whole explanation of, look, I don't answer my phone. You can't call me during the week in the middle of the day. My mom can, but we're not there yet. I'm busy. This is what I'm doing. I don't have time to catch you up on all that's changed in my life and my goals. That was a big piece of it. And there was a time where I wrote something on Facebook. I don't remember what it was, and it wasn't about him. But he put some childish remark on my Facebook. Something about, I don't remember. It was something about almost like I had put something on my Facebook about him, and he was saying, oh, it wasn't like that, or you got to kick him in when he's down or something. It wasn't about him. I post a lot of content because there's a lot of content to post. That was a piece for me too of like, okay, that's just childish. That is not it for me. I'm not going to deal with that. I am at this point 33 years old. I don't have time for that stuff. It's very clear that there's a lot of work that has to be done for him, by him, and I'm just not going to be the person that facilitates it for him. So I pretty much made a decision that day that I'm not willing to put any effort into this. It's just not a priority. It's very hard to adopt a new priority when there are so many other priorities. I'm married. We have a household. I have a business, right? We have an 18-person team. That stuff is the stuff that I've been pouring into for the last 7 years. I'm not going to be able to give the amount of time that it would require to nurture this relationship with this new person.
The last three things that I want to talk about with this subject of your father is, as we were talking, I was thinking, do you feel that the chapter is finally closed with finding out who your father is and meeting him? The second thing to that would be, would you ever regret maybe not keeping him around? Maybe do you think you might regret it later on down the line?
What was the first question? Sorry.
No, you're good. The first one would probably be, do you feel like that chapter is closed now that you finally got to know your father and you got to know the person he is, and finally seen his face? Do you feel that that chapter is closed?
Yes. I feel like that chapter is closed, and I feel like I took the lessons that I needed. I learned a lot about myself. I learned a lot about humans. I learned a lot about him, and I don't think there's many other lessons there for me. And no, I don't think I'll regret it. It's very hard to say, and I have a practice where I try to reverse engineer regret and imagine what it would be like. That's an emotional thing. It's an emotional thing to try to do, or maybe it's logical. I don't know. I can't imagine I will regret it. I'm sure I'll have some sort of weird emotional identity crisis when he passes away, but I don't think I'll regret it. I think if anything, it'll be it's going to sound dark. It'll be kind of a new chapter in my life. It'll be different. It won't be that I don't know my dad, or it'll be my dad's not here anymore. So I think that'll be a different chapter in my life, as cold and calculated as that may sound. But I don't think I'll regret it. No, I'm always thinking of that. I'm very conscious of what if this was to happen 2 days from today, what would I do different today? So if you said, and I understand this is very dark, but if you said your father's going to pass away in a month, I don't think I'd go see him for the next month. I don't think that would change it for me. I think I've got what I needed. I really do. I think I got what I needed, and I was able to forgive him, but I'm doing my thing. And yeah, I don't think I'll regret it.
You mentioned just the question that I really wanted to ask you was, what do you think about the most?
What do I think about the most? It's hard. That's a hard question. I think about the pressure. There's a lot of pressure being a business owner, and there's a lot of pressure when you're delivering stuff to clients and you're trying not to let people down. That's probably the thing I think about the most. I am thinking about how to get better very consistently, but probably not the most. Sundays are down days for me, so I'm not really thinking about that. But I am thinking about the business, and I am thinking about what's going on behind the scenes. That's a big thing. I'm pretty constantly thinking about how I make people feel. That's always a thing for me. Even in the pre-interview kind of green room thing I was saying, I just want to make life easy for you guys. I want to be the easiest person you've ever had on this show. Like, ask me whatever you want. I want to make you happy. I want to make life easier for you. I'm thinking about how I make you feel. That's something I'm always thinking of. I'm always trying to improve that. But I would say the pressure of trying to grow as much as we are, that never really goes away. Some nights before I'm getting ready to fall asleep, I'll have a moment of like, oh man, I need to text Boom in the morning. That happens nightly. That's pretty common. When I wake up in the morning, I'm thinking of that first thing. A lot of people, I've been asked the question, what gets you out of bed? It's like, my alarm gets me out of bed. And there's a lot of stuff that's got to get done. It's not always the fortune cookie. I wake up and I know I'm on a mission to impact every person on the planet. That just isn't always the way it is. Some days I wake up and the pressure of the day is overwhelming. The pressure of this week was, I did not know how I was going to get through this week. Now, again, it's constructive pressure, it's aligned pressure, and I would go as far to say it's privileged pressure. A lot of other people don't have the opportunity to choose the pressure they're under. I do, and I'm very grateful for that. But it is definitely something that I think about obsessively.
Tell me a little bit more about that. You mentioned that you feel like you have to really care about how you make people feel. Tell me a little bit more about that, because the way I'm thinking about it is, did you have people care about how you felt when you were younger? Why do you feel like that's true?
Yeah, I feel like I did. I feel like I've been surrounded by pretty positive people for most of my life, honestly. Not always maybe the highest self-improvement set point, but people that wanted to make me feel good. I am someone who, I was bullied once. I wore glasses, and the first day I wore glasses, somebody called me Four Eyes. But other than that, I was never really bullied. And I definitely took part in some bullying, for sure. Nothing crazy, but I wasn't always the nicest person to people I knew. Again, it wasn't anything terrible, but it's less than the standard of character that I would hold today, for sure. But I just think at this stage, I have talked to so many of our community members. I mean, we're 7 years into this journey. We've done 1,500 episodes. I've done thousands of coaching calls. I've gotten to see how your words, how your intentions, how your attitude, how your traumas, your triggers, your mistakes affect people. And I've gotten to be behind the scenes very vulnerably with people who have had a lot of challenging things happen to them. And I've always wanted to be a safe place for that. Always. I have always had a soft spot for protecting people. And our audience is primarily female, and I want to protect them. That's always been my thing. I want to protect people who maybe have not got the protection that they want, or maybe haven't had somebody stand up for them. I'll stand up for them. That's what I'm here to do. I'm all for that. So part of that is understanding and truly caring about the way that you make people feel. I feel like a lot of people take that for granted, or they get entitled. They get entitled to the fact that, oh, people want to talk to me. And they forget when people didn't want to talk to you, what you did. And when people didn't want to talk to you, what you did was you talked to the people who did. And you really took care of those people and you added value to their lives. I don't ever want to lose sight of that. I don't think it comes from me not getting that feeling. I think I've always been that. I've always tried to stand up for people once I became conscious of what was happening. That's kind of my mission. I have just heard so many horror stories of mostly women being treated terribly. And I would like to be a piece of the reason that ends, or at least improves. And I always want our community to be the safest community possible. There's not a lot of communities that are mostly women that are run by two men. So my business partner is Alan. He's a man like I am. And there's not a lot of communities that are filled with such amazing, heart-driven, aligned humans that are run by guys like us. And I take that responsibility very seriously.
If you can define, this is my favorite question to ask. If you can define happiness and success, what would be your definition in the dictionary for both of those words?
I think happiness is one of the most confused things because people, and this is just my belief, people believe they want to be happy. I don't think that's true. I think people want to be fulfilled. So I would say happiness is results-based short-term feeling. So if you like me, Isaac, I will be happy. I think one of the things that's really helped me, and one of the reasons I enjoy life as much as I do, even though it's challenging, is I am fulfilled. I believe fulfillment is being in the process of doing something that you love, in the process of doing something that you feel you were born to do, in the process of doing something that is growing and contributing towards something far greater than yourself. You would never interview me if it wasn't for the podcast and everything else. Everything is bigger than me. Everything is bigger than my story. It's bigger than me in front of this microphone. It's not about me. It's about everything else. Fulfillment, I believe, is what we are really, really aiming for. So I would say success is adding value to a worthy cause that you truly believe in and finding fulfillment along the way, growing and contributing towards something far greater than yourself, and being on a mission that you'll probably never, ever, ever accomplish, but you are so into the process of that you don't care if you do. I don't know if I'll ever get an award that says we're the top, most successful self-improvement company ever. I doubt that's ever going to happen. But the process of trying is really fulfilling. And it's really challenging, but it's really fulfilling. And then if I was to simplify it, success to me is being the healthiest, wealthiest, most in love version of myself by adding as much value as humanly possible to our community and whatever community I'm coming across. So that's why I would say I feel the most successful I ever have. Not because I'm a bajillionaire and not because we're the top podcast in the world. Neither of those things are happening currently. But I love what I do and I get to impact people every day. And I'm deeply in love with my wife and we have an amazing relationship. And I have a strong, capable body that I get the privilege to work on every single day. And I would say I'm the most holistically successful I've ever been.
Kevin, the reason why I asked those questions is because you mentioned something to me in our conversation that we were having through the forum. And the thing that you mentioned was that a lot of people find the rock bottom, and to you, that rock bottom had a basement. I want you to touch on that because you really mentioned something interesting, and that's why I asked the question of success, was because a lot of people think that you said you at your mid-20s, you had everything you could possibly imagine you wanted to have, the nice girlfriend, the nice car, the nice house, the nice everything, right? But you didn't find your fulfillment in that. You hit depression, you had suicidal thoughts. Walk me through that. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so I went from making $15 an hour as, what was I? I was in construction. So I was doing some home renovation with a buddy of mine. I was getting paid $15 an hour under the table. Awesome. I went from that to the first job I worked when I got this weatherization job. The day I started, or the day before I started, my boss said, just so you know, you're on probation as someone who's new here. You're going to be making $10 less an hour than everybody else. And I was like, well, here's the thing. I'm not going to be making any money, right? And he said, no, you'll be making $50 an hour instead of $60. So I went from making $15 an hour. I 4x'd my income by getting this new job. That was a step in the right direction, at least I thought. So that I have the wealth thing. The wealth thing seems to be working. Awesome. A year or two after that, I ended up getting a beautiful girlfriend. I met a beautiful girlfriend online, model, gorgeous, awesome. This is great. And then a year after that, or 8 months after that, I did a bodybuilding show and I'm in the best shape of my life. And you could put me in a magazine. I was in such good shape. I kept waiting for the next shoe to drop. So the money didn't fix the internal stuff. I was still super insecure. Okay, maybe the girlfriend will. Well, let me go get a beautiful girlfriend. That didn't fix it. If anything, that might have made it worse because I wasn't ready to handle that. I was super insecure. I wasn't controlling, but I definitely was overly insecure. And then I'm in really good shape. That'll fix it. No, that didn't fix it either. All of that happened at such a time for me where I almost felt like I was there. I felt like I was where I needed to be in order to feel successful. But I lost that all pretty quickly. So after my bodybuilding show, I was definitely hovering around an eating disorder because my hormones were all messed up from dieting for so hard for so long. It was brutal, absolutely brutal. My girlfriend ended up leaving me because I was just depressed and anxious and unconsciously holding her back. She had big goals, big dreams. I was afraid she was going to leave me behind. She ended up leaving me behind. And then work got super slow. And when work got super slow, my bills had just doubled because my girlfriend moved out. I didn't know how I was going to make do. So my thought process was, if I make as much money as humanly possible, all these other problems are going to fix themselves. Because it was really the first time that I had ever been that heartbroken, had that much responsibility, and had that much awareness at the same time. So I did what I thought would work, and I just tried to make as much money as possible. The reason it all came together the way it did was when I opened my final pay stub and I made $100,000 and I accomplished my goal, I knew I didn't want to do that anymore because I knew I didn't want to have that success. That wasn't success, right? Much to your question, that wasn't actually what I would define as success. I had this podcast. I love this podcast. Episode number 7 of my podcast, long before any of this was even a thought, I said I want to wake up when I want to go to the gym when I want to podcast with amazing people, spend time with my friends, my family, and I want to be my own boss. And that was something I was longing for. So when you fall out of love with a job that requires so much of your time, it's not like I was waking up, driving to the office, and then coming home at night. And I have empathy for anybody out there who's dealing with that and doesn't like their job. I was waking up on a Sunday, doing my laundry, taking it out of my suitcase, into the washer, into the dryer, back into my suitcase, driving to the office, getting a work van, and then driving 6 hours to stay the night in a hotel. And I was there Sunday night, Monday night, Tuesday night, Wednesday night, Thursday night. I'd work a full day Friday, and then I'd drive home. So not only did I hate my job, but I was homesick every single day. And that just took a toll. That just kept taking a toll on me. And the motivation for the money went. I would call out, I would leave the job site early, and the people that were working under me would get pissed. Because if we're making, let's just say we're making $80 an hour, and we leave the job site 4 hours early, everybody's losing out on $320, but I don't care. I want to go home. I don't want to do this anymore. This sucks. I'm sick of this. So it got to the point where I just felt so stuck and so trapped. So when my girlfriend left me, that was rock bottom. That was initial rock bottom. My goodness, I don't think it can get worse than this. This is brutal. The morning I woke up and was having suicidal ideations, I was in a hotel room 6 hours away from anybody who cared about me. I just felt like this was it. I don't know, what else am I going to do with my life? I didn't have a plan A. This is my plan B. I don't have a plan C. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? It just got very, very heavy very, very quickly. And I was just grinding, putting my feelings to the side and trying to stay like I was looking successful. And eventually it catches up. And then you have that thought of, if I wasn't here, all my problems wouldn't be here either. And that's really the way it went for me. It happened very slow, but it also happened very fast. And in retrospect, it makes sense. But at the time, everything was external for me. External things will fix internal voids. Now it's the opposite. I know the more comfortable I am with myself, the more I understand myself, self-awareness, competence, self-worth, belief. You can create stuff in the external world when you're whole internally. It's very hard to take something external and make you whole internally. It doesn't really work that way.
You mentioned that, I think that's a really tough question to ask yourself when you're alone and you're having those type of thoughts. You asked yourself, if you weren't here, would all your problems be solved? Walk me through that.
Yeah, the thought for me was, okay, right now I am in a crusty hotel room in the middle of New Jersey. There is no end in sight for what I'm doing. I have no way out, no plan B, no plan C, no plan D. I am at this point, probably the most successful person my family has ever seen. All my friends look up to me because I make more money than them. Right? They come up to my house, I buy pizza, I'm buying the weed for us, I'm getting the drinks, whatever. I take care of my buddies. I make a lot of money, so it doesn't matter. There was so much significance there. So it wasn't just that I felt trapped. It wasn't just that I felt stuck. It wasn't just that I was anxious and depressed. A big piece of it was I didn't want to start over. I felt like I had made it way further than I ever should have. Maybe 3 or 4 years before I got that job, I was cleaning hospital toilets, thinking to myself, I can't do this forever. What am I going to do? A few years before that, I was pumping gas. In the same town I grew up in, I was pumping gas for people I went to school with. I was pumping gas for girls I would have crushes on. It happened so fast that I was so afraid to lose that. I was so afraid to start over. I was so afraid to look like a loser. I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't know anything else. I thought that job was going to be it for me. And we literally used to have a running joke where we would say to each other, my coworkers and I, if I ever lost this job, I would kill myself because there's no way I'm ever going to get a job like this again. I didn't get paid a ton of money because I was great at my job. I got paid a ton of money because I worked at a company that worked for state contracts. So everybody had to get paid that amount of money. So I felt like I got lucky. I felt like I got lucky falling into this, and I wasn't going to get lucky again. That was the big thing for me. If I leave here, there's nowhere that's going to be like this for me. I'm not going to find another place like this. I'm not going to get lucky again. I'm going to go back to making a little bit above minimum wage maybe, and I'm going to lose everything, including my reputation. That was really, really, really heavy. And honestly, Isaac, it was hard the day I left my job, I remember I was talking to my project manager, and when it was done, it was like, all right, I don't work for you guys anymore. This is done. I remember I regretted it. I had a moment where one weight was lifted off my shoulders of, wow, I don't have to do that anymore. Tomorrow I can wake up whenever I want and I don't have to do anything. Okay. Then there was a weight that was replaced by, oh my God, there's no money coming in and you got to figure it out. But I had a moment where I was like, I think I'd made the wrong decision. I regretted leaving that job for a very short time because I was scared. It was even hard to leave it even though I didn't want to be there anymore. So that's another piece of it is I was afraid to start over and I was afraid not to be successful. And I think that was a piece of why I thought it would be easier not to be here. I wouldn't have to work through all this. I wouldn't have to start over. I wouldn't have to explain myself. I wouldn't have to talk about it. I think all of that really weighed heavily on where my mindset was at that time.
And so how did you push through it? Because now you have a whole, I like how you have it as a university, you have a whole platform on talking about self-confidence and how to lift other people up. You mentioned earlier about the thing that you most care about is to help other people and to be able to be an outlet for protection for them. Knowing this now, knowing the story now, how did you push through after that? It's something very difficult to push yourself out of those thoughts. How did you overcome it?
I had great people around me. Alan is my business partner. He's been mentoring me since day one. He's the person I called for a reason. He's a big reason. He wouldn't let me quit. And he would if I wanted to. But I have a tattoo on my arm that says never quit. Like that's part of who I am. That's part of my identity. When I started this, it was never about money. I wasn't thinking about money. That's not why I started this. I didn't want to be a business owner. I didn't want to be an entrepreneur. I didn't want any of that. But when I started and I would get messages from people, much like I believe you mentioned, that sticks with you. And I was fulfilled even though I wasn't successful. When I left so this is kind of how my life went. I felt like a giant loser when I was younger. I felt like everybody was laughing at me. Then I got success and I felt like everybody was looking up to me. So I went super external. I was very, very successful externally, but not internally. Then I leave my job and I am not successful externally. I am the brokest I've ever been, the loneliest I've ever been, and nobody cares about the podcast. But I remember one day I was walking around the kitchen and I moved in with my best friend, not Alan, but one of my other best friend. And I remember walking around the kitchen and for the first time, maybe ever, feeling proud of myself. Even though I had no external results, zero, no external results. That was something for me. That was a hint. That was a suggestion. That was a look at what's to come possibly. That was a big piece of it. And then now I can't imagine doing anything different. In the beginning, it was fun. It was fulfilling. And I didn't know how serious it was going to be. So it was just like, this is really cool. We're having a lot of experiences. I'm meeting new people. I'm a podcaster. That's awesome. In the beginning, I think I was just naive. I was naive to what this was going to take. So I wasn't really thinking about that. I was thinking that if I could get to the point where I could pay my bills, then I could do this forever. That really was what it was for me. If I can get to the point where I can be a podcaster and I can pay my bills, this is fine. I can show up. I can grind my face off. I'll outwork almost anyone. That's fine. Then when we started to see the impact it was having, it was like, oh my goodness, this could like really be something. So it almost goes from a possibility to a probability to a responsibility. And once it became a responsibility, that's it. There's no second guessing. I'm never going to do anything else ever. I'm not going to retire. I'm not interested. I'm not going to sell my company. We're not going to go public. We're not going to pay to be in Forbes. I'm not going to pay to be a Wall Street best-selling author. None of that. I'm not interested. We're in this for the long haul, and we're in this for impact. In the beginning, it was fun. Then we started to see that it could actually be something. And now we know we can really have an impact because we are. And I have a wonderful business partner. And I definitely would not have been able to do this without him. No way, not a chance. I am not self-made. I am very supported by amazing people around me. So he's a big reason why I was able to get through it. And then the last thing, when I left my job, my depression all but went away. When I left my job, I felt a million times better from a depression standpoint. I was having panic attacks because I was so anxious, because I was so uncertain. But that depression went away completely. That's a sign. That's a sign for me that I'm doing the right thing. So that was a big piece of it too, where life was hard. It was really hard being broke. It was really hard. But I always said it would be worth it. I didn't always believe I could do it, but I did know it would be worth it. And I still, to this day, I told Alan, I tell him this all the time, I will continue doing what I'm doing for as long as humanly possible, / until I wake up one day and say, I don't think it's worth it anymore. And that's just the way I'm trying to live now. It's worth it. And I expect it always will be.
The conversation has been a lot about a lot of people are driven by money. This is such a simple question to ask, but I feel like it's such a strong answer that you can give. Do you believe money can buy happiness?
I believe money can buy momentary bouts of happiness. Yes. I bought a new BMW recently. I am happier driving the BMW than I was driving the Mazda. 100%. But it does not fulfill me. It's not going to fix my marriage. It's not going to make me feel better about my body. It's not going to make me a better podcaster. Will it create momentary bouts of confidence? Probably. Will it create sustainable bouts of self-worth? Most likely not. So yeah, I believe money can assist in buying happiness because it can buy you possibility to do more of the stuff that you love. Do I think it will buy you fulfillment? No. I believe, and if we look at it, I don't know the stats, but two things. One, many lottery winners end up losing all of their money and more. And I do believe there is a statistic, and I don't know it off the top of my head, but I do believe there is a statistic for the amount of lottery winners that take their own lives. It's because it's not fulfilling. Getting $1 billion or getting $100 million or winning the lottery is not a fulfilling experience. It probably brings bouts of happiness. but I think fulfillment comes from work. Let's go full circle. This has been the most challenging week of my life, all things considered. I'll also probably look back and say this is the most fulfilling week of my life as well. And I don't think that's a coincidence. So I think money can buy momentary bouts of happiness. I don't think it can buy sustainable bouts of fulfillment.
The last few questions that I have, I think, are very important questions. And this is something that I've seen a lot throughout social media and the perspective that people want to have on others. What do you think about people having to look a certain way, portray themselves a certain way on social media or anywhere, or act as a second face to themselves on something that they're really not, to please others?
It's a very challenging question, because here's the thing. Psychologically, and again, let me run this out, but psychologically, Isaac, the first thing you said to me was, I really love your setup. I really love your background. There's a reason my background looks the way it does. I want to be taken seriously, right? So even that's me playing into the fact that the more professional I look, the more professional or the more serious I'll be taken. So it's hard. If you want to impact people, you kind of have to understand and have what they impact. You have to understand what will impact them. You have to understand what will motivate them. You have to understand what will influence them. It would be very hard for me to be a relationship coach if I didn't have a great marriage. I think many people take it too far. I would say it depends on the intention. If you said to me, what's more wrong? Someone who rents a Lamborghini so they can sell a course on how to make money online, who has never sold, they've never done it, they don't know how to do it, or someone rents a Lamborghini so they can sell their book on how to make more money in the workforce, save more money, and invest properly, my vote would be the positive one is at least the person who's trying to help. But they also understand that if you don't look like you know how to handle money, nobody's going to help you or let you help them handle their money. So I think it really depends on the intention. If you're doing it for attention, if you're doing it for significance, that is not sustainable. Even if you're doing it to help people, that's not really sustainable either, but I do believe it is more noble. I really, really, really do. But I think a lot of us don't understand why people are actually doing it. And we assume that everybody is way more successful than they are. That makes it really, really challenging. I've had a lot of behind the scenes conversations with people who are quote unquote coaches who are making boatloads of money, and they're not making any money. So I understand that most of what we see online is just not accurate. I like to think that my life is very accurate, but I don't show myself crying into the pillow at night because I'm so overwhelmed. I have in the past, but I don't show that often. Now, that doesn't happen often, but I'm not exactly shouting from the rooftops that my wife and I had a challenging moment because I miscommunicated something, right? So even that, my social media is more a positive spin on my life. It's not 100% real, vulnerable all the time. I try to do the best I can. I really, really do. I'm conscious of that. So I think it depends. I think there's levels to it. I think there's moral and ethical questions. And I think it depends on the intention. If it's to help someone, that's more positive and beneficial than if it's to just make a boatload of money. But even then, the philosophical question is, could you do it in a more aligned manner? And transparently, Isaac, I appreciate a lot of the compliments I get and people say you're successful and big podcast and all this stuff. We're playing on hard mode because we're not willing to do most of that. I'm not willing to do a lot of the stuff, the marketing tactics that other people are doing. That's just not who I am. I don't want to be a controversial figure to get me further, not interested. I don't want to take certain pictures in certain ways, not really interested. I'm not willing to say controversial things, not really interested. So as much as you know it exists, you can also avoid it if you choose, but there are a lot of people playing the game, and it might take you a lot longer to get to the end zone of whatever your game is if you don't play by their rules. I'm all for it. I say you do you, but understand that might make things a little bit more challenging.
With everything that we talked about today and everything that we we've shared, there's the one key question that I love to get from everybody is, with everything that you've been through, with all the experiences that you had, with the moments of meeting your dad and those suicidal thoughts, the younger age of being around with your mom, what has been something that you know now that you wish you would have known when you were 18 years old? Maybe it could be something that maybe you might want to change, or you might have wanted to change. What is something that you can tell yourself when you were 18 years old that you know now?
One of my favorite thoughts around that is your adversity becomes your advantage. Your adversity of going through stuff, your adversity of suffering, struggling, if you use it correctly, that can be your advantage. It can be an unfair advantage. I had a friend of mine one time who said, sometimes I feel guilty because I haven't been through any of the stuff you've been through. And I said to him, I said, first of all, don't ever feel guilty about that. That's highly illogical. I understand, I appreciate it, but that's not a you thing. It's not like you created this for me. And part two of that is I'm grinding my face off, and I think I'm capable of things that I wouldn't be if I didn't go through that. If I didn't deal with that adversity, I might not have the grit. I might not have the resilience. Alan and I talk about that all the time. When you're used to being beaten up, not physically, but just proverbially in this as an example, when life beats you up, it's not as bad. It's not as bad when I have a rough day. It's not as bad when I have to work that many hours. When you've gone through stuff in your past, a challenging present isn't as challenging because it's perspective. It's with contrast. There's a sliding scale to it, right? It's in correlation to. A bad day now is different than a bad day 10 years ago, 15 years ago when I was 18. So that's what I would say. I would say, Kev, I know right now it seems like you have a lot of adversity and you don't know what's going on in your life, and this dad thing is weird, and maybe your family didn't have a lot of money and you don't want to go to college and you don't know what you're going to do. Don't forget that every bit of adversity that you deal with can be your advantage later, but you got to make sure you understand what it actually means. And I would have told them to focus a little bit on self-awareness for sure. When you understand yourself, you'll understand the adversity. So those would be the big ones. Would he have listened, Isaac? We could do an entire episode on that. I don't know if he would have listened. I like to think maybe, but 18-year-old Kev was pretty stubborn, unfortunately.
And I always say this, I always say that we probably have to go through these experiences and the life that was given to us to be able to be the person that we are today. I don't think you would be the person that you are today or do the stuff that you are doing today if it wasn't for those experiences and it wasn't for the way that you grew up. So if I were to answer that question, I would say I wouldn't change anything, and I wouldn't want to go back and, I could tell myself stuff, but again, like you said, it could be things that, we might not understand yet. And I was actually told a lot of that when I was growing up, is that when you grow up, you're going to know all these things that you wish you would have listened, and I took it as a joke. And then now seeing it, it's like, I probably should have listened and I probably should have done them, but you don't. But you have to go through that stuff in order to understand it. And so I really, really strongly agree with that. What is an untold story? An untold story you've never shared before that you are able to share with us here today?
My goodness. An untold story. I don't know that I have many because I'm pretty honest and I've been on so many platforms. Let me think for a second.
And it could be anything. It can be anything as far as just like things that you've never shared before that you've always wanted to share.
I got one. I got a good one. When I was younger, there was this canal down by where my family lives. I lived with my mom and my grandmother. And my mom was like, hey, we're going to go rafting, and we're going to get a raft and we're going to go in the canal. And the canal was just boring. It was just steady water. So we took the raft and we put it into the river on the other side. And this river became quite dangerous quite fast. And at one point, the raft flipped over. My mom and I were both in the water, just floating, going down what seemed like rapids at the time. And I'll never forget, my mom snagged me. She grabbed a log, she snagged me and pulled me over and saved me. And I felt like my mom is super badass. And I remember thinking how brave she was. And we haven't talked about that, my mom and I, in a minute. I don't think I've also ever said that publicly because nobody's ever asked me to share an obscure story before. So that day, my mom was my hero. And I was like, damn, she is strong and she is brave. and she should never let us go rafting down the rapids again.
You know, I feel that as you're sharing that story and portraying your mom as a superhero and just a very strong person, I feel like that was the person she was for you growing up without having your dad around. And I really have a lot of respect for your mom and yourself for seeing her as that and for seeing her as a superhero, because she really was for the first 27 years of your life. I believe she was somebody that, you know, was being your protection.
I appreciate it. Look, hold on. Let me show you something. She actually texted me. She texted me a picture of young Kev. It's very telling. That's, I don't know if we'll be able to see it. Hold on, let me zoom out. Maybe it'll do it. That's Kev right there. See that?
Yeah. That's crazy.
Little scrawny guy. She texted me that like 2 hours ago.
That's awesome. Kevin, we have a closing tradition here, and our closing tradition is that our previous guest leaves a question for the next guest, not knowing who the next guest is going to be. And the question that they left for you, let me just pull it out right here. It would be, if there is one thing in life that you can do to change the world, what would that be?
I'm doing it. I'm doing it 7 days a week. I'm going to do it for the rest of my life. I found my thing, and I will never stop doing it. I am doing it. Podcasting, speaking, coaching, being relatable, telling stories, hopefully, that help people. I do believe I'm doing it.
Kev, what would be a question you want to leave for the next guest? It could be anything, life, business.
One of my favorite questions to ask podcast guests would be, what do you hope to accomplish before you die? What is the thing? What is the thing that if you accomplish today, you'd be okay with leaving the world behind? Heavy one, Isaac. Oh, I cannot hear you, Isaac. Just FYI.
My bad. There you go. I had myself on mute for a little bit.
That's all good.
I feel like I can answer that in your perspective, knowing the conversation that we just had today, and I feel like that's helping people for you. Is it?
100%. Yeah. If again, this is like a little bit of an ego thing, but a lot of people say, like, if I took the podcast away, what would you do? You're not going to take the podcast away. Good luck. Good luck. No way. I'll die for this. You can't take this away. I love this. This is what I do. This is who I am. So yes, that is it.
Kevin, awesome. I want to, if you still have a little bit more time, I want to bring Daniel up to ask any questions.
Bring him on.
So Daniel, if you want to come on and just ask any questions. I can't hear you.
You're on mute, Daniel.
I pulled an Isaac, sorry. This is a very exciting podcast. I appreciate your time. Okay. I kind of want to take it back to the beginning of the podcast. You said something that kind of resonated. You said you didn't go to college, right? And what you were talking throughout the whole podcast, you didn't go to college. You started construction. You made $15 an hour, and then you transferred over to a job where you were making $50 an hour without college. I myself didn't go to college. I was bored in high school, so I actually dropped out, got my GED, and went straight into the workforce out of necessity. And it resonates right now because I am trying to grow in a professional manner, but the biggest limitation I have is college. They need a certificate, they need that bachelor's, they need that XYZ to grow in the path that I'm in. What is your perspective on that, right? I talked to friends of mine, their parents, they didn't even go to high school, they were in middle school, and I have a few friends that their parents are in high positions in high companies, corporations, without going to college, right? Back in the day, when I talked to their parents, it's you work hard, climb the ladder, you earn it. Now it's more of, if you have a title, you can jump straight into those positions. What is your point nowadays with that, in the sense of, back in the day, college wasn't that big of a deal for things, and now it's something that's becoming a huge requirement. What is your point on that?
Yeah, that's a challenging thing. That is a challenging thing. I think personality goes further than people give credit to, right? For every 10 companies, that are out there that say you have to have a college degree to do this, this, this. I'm willing to bet there's one company that doesn't require that. Maybe we just haven't found it yet. And I think personality is something that personality, humility, and self-awareness, we reached out to our communities. We said, hey, we're looking for someone to come on the team. And this young man reached out, Brandon, in 2020. And we did like an interview. It was Alan and I in our studio Zooming with Brandon. And we said, what are your qualifications? And he said, I don't have any. And I'm not really good with tech. I don't feel like I'm super smart, but I will work really, really hard and I'll learn whatever you want me to learn. And that was it. We were like, cool, you're in. Done. That's it. I think that goes a really long distance. One of the reasons I got the job I got is because I went through a training program in weatherization. And when I got to the end of it, the lady who brought me in said, you have a really great personality. We're going to connect you with the biggest company here. And I was like, all right, I don't know what that means. Then when I got an interview by my future boss, he said, you have a really great personality. I'm going to let you jump the line and you're going to be next for the job. A lot of the opportunities I've gotten are not because of my skill sets, because I didn't have any. A lot of them are because I'm hopefully a good person and I have a good personality. And I think sometimes the way you make people feel goes a long way, maybe longer than we give credit for. So I would say there's people out there like me who didn't go to college, then started a company that don't care whether or not you went to college. We just probably haven't found them yet, is what I would say.
That's amazing. And that really is, I think that's something that resonates a lot with a few people that I know that I work with, the company that I'm at right now. I'm in a position where a lot of other companies require degrees and certifications and stuff. And I went in there and I said, I don't have the experience for that, but I am a hard worker and I'm a quick learner. And I got the opportunity for there to start off. I think that's completely true. Personality is huge nowadays. Going on to the next subject, which is something that Isaac took a little bit of time to talk about at the beginning, is you said you didn't have a father, right? And you had that when you were asked, right? You said your mother works in the medical field and your father works in construction. And I think that's funny because I know a lot of friends and personally myself that we don't know our fathers. And I remember I had one of my best friends. He in middle school, there was a thing career day and stuff, and everyone's fathers would show up, and I'd just be like, no one showed up, right? For me, it was just kind of awkward for kids that are in that position, right? People that are listening and are in that position. You kind of explained your whole process, what you did, everything, how you coped with it. What are some steps to help with that coping? Hey, you don't have a dad, and things like that happen. How does one work with that?
Yeah, that is a tough one. I almost answered Isaac's question when you said, what did you need to know when you were 18? What advice would you give your 18-year-old self? I think if you're younger and you're growing up without a parent and they're absentee in some way, shape, or form, you need to know it's not your fault. That's not why they left. They didn't leave because of you. You were a baby, or you were a young infant, or you're a child. You didn't know what was going on. It's probably not a you thing. It's probably not because of you. It probably has very little to do with you. It probably is the person on the other end. I think that's it. If someone leaves because they don't want to be around you, that says more about them, especially in that capacity, than it does about you. And this would be, and again, I understand this is very logical, but when I met my dad, I had a moment where I said, honestly, I think I'm glad he wasn't in my life, because I ask myself this question often. Is it better to have a toxic parent in the picture, or is it better to not have any parent in the picture? Now, obviously, you could have a parent that's not toxic, but if that parent left, I don't know how well developed they are or well balanced they are. So that would be the thing I would say is there are a lot of people out there that have parents that aren't good to them, and they have a lot of parents, or they have parents that are creating traumas. they're creating triggers, they're creating adversity in their child's life right now. I know that's not the case for you, but maybe the way it's set up for you, you're avoiding some of that. That would probably be the best answer I can give. I don't know if there is a good answer to that. That is a challenging thing. I would say it's not your fault. It's not your fault. You had very little to do with it. You were little. You were a baby. You were an infant. The person just wasn't ready to be responsible and step up, and that says more about them than it does you. And there's no reason, this is the other thing too, there's no reason you can't be an incredible parent. You want to talk about lighting a fire under someone's butt? You grow up missing someone, that is a really good example of what not to be. And I'm willing to bet if you're willing to face whatever is surrounding that, so face the traumas that come with that and the triggers and the adversity that comes with that, and say, I'm never going to be that for someone else, I'm willing to bet you're going to be a pretty damn good parent. So I think that's another thing too.
Love that. And then I have for my final question, it's a two-piece question. The first part is, you talked a little bit about the word happiness and how it's fulfillment that most people are looking for, and they confuse it for happiness. I have this tradition with my wife, right? When I was younger, I had a mentor, and I was speaking to him, and in the conversation, he paused me in the middle of it. He said, "Can you define this word for me?" And I was kind of like, he caught me off guard. And I was like, yes and no, I can give you like my definition of it. He's like, no, but can you give me the definition of the word? And he, in the conversation he had with me, he said, a lot of people nowadays use words that they hear or that they see without knowing the real definition of it, which then opens up a whole new world of people using words incorrectly. Or one of the prime examples I like to give is when people say, I'm sorry, right? It's, you have a kid, and the first thing that, he says is, I'm sorry, right? But we've lost, in my point of view, right? We lost the meanings behind words. How do you feel about that? Do you think that that's something that's happened? Do you think that word meaning has been lost with time? What is your point on that, like your view?
Yeah, I mean, as somebody who is a speaker and I rely very heavily on words, I try to choose my words very carefully. You'll notice my word choice. Yeah, I would say so. I would say there's a lot of stuff out there. And when there's stuff out there, you're going to pick up on it. And you'll notice, I don't know if I have a good example off the top of my head, but you'll notice people saying things that they have no idea what it really means, for sure. One of the things that I think it's just an awareness thing. I really do. Before I was a business owner, I remember hearing about people like Bill Gates and all these people, and I would say, oh my goodness, I can't believe they have that much money and they're not changing the world. They don't have that much money. They have that much stake in a company that is worth or valued at X amount. So I might do the same thing and say, yeah, these wealthy people, they just don't care about the world. Those aren't my words. Those are words on a similar awareness that I have that represents something that I believe in the time, because I don't really understand the truth. So I would say, yeah, I don't want to say it's our responsibility. I think it would be very beneficial to everyone to figure out what their actual point of view is, not what is the closest point of view that somebody's already said, because you might be missing stuff. That might not speak for exactly what your belief is. I would say I agree with that. I would say I agree with that statement, and I think a lot of it is an awareness issue. I don't expect anybody to agree with everything I said or anything I said necessarily. I would like it to drum up some thought around what is my unique definition of success, fulfillment. What would I do in that situation with my parent, my father? Use external stuff as a sounding board. Use it as inspiration. Use it as a place to start, and then paint your own picture. Use your own canvas.
Love that. And I'm going to sneak one last question past Isaac, and if it's okay with you. It's
Yes.
one of the questions that I really like to ask, and that is, if you could go back to whatever point in your life, would you go back and change anything, or would you keep everything the same as you have right now?
I would keep everything the same. But again, if you asked me when I was down and out, I might change that answer. But yeah, I would keep everything the same. I'm still here, and I have a deep belief that even if I have something that's hurting me from my past, if I do enough work and I talk to the right people and I'm vulnerable and I'm brave, I can get over it. I don't want to say get over it. I can overcome it. I don't want to say get over it as if it doesn't matter. I believe that. I believe that I can do the work. I believe that I can continue learning, growing, evolving, looking in the past, figuring out myself at a deeper level. So no, if I could go back, I would go back, but I wouldn't change anything. And that would be a trip. Be a trip to go back though, for sure. But I would keep things the same.
If you like this conversation, make sure you guys follow the podcast on Apple and Spotify. Make sure you guys subscribe on YouTube. And if you know of any guest who would be a good fit for our podcast, please send me a message. And most importantly, I hope that you take something out of this podcast to put into perspective in your life and maybe help guide you through the journeys that you're facing right now. So thank you.